Black Hole. The Black Hole of Calcutta became history's most famous prison suffocation event. On June 20th, 1756, Indian ruler Siraj-ud-Dowlah captured Fort William in Calcutta. He ordered 64 British prisoners locked in the fort's jail cell. This cell measured just 14 feet by 18 feet, about the size of a small bedroom. The cell had only 2 small windows with iron bars. June in Calcutta brings extreme heat and humidity. The temperature that night reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit. With 64 men crammed into such a small space, the air quickly ran out. John Zephaniah Holwell survived and wrote about that night. He described men crushing each other trying to reach the windows. They drank their own sweat and urine before dying. By morning, 43 men were dead. The bodies remained standing upright because there was no room for them to fall. This event led to international discussions about minimum space requirements for prisoners. Ship deaths. British prison ships killed more Americans than all Revolutionary War battles combined. From 1776 to 1783, Britain used old warships as floating prisons in New York Harbor. The worst was HMS Jersey, nicknamed Hell Afloat by prisoners. This ship was built to hold 250 sailors, but the British packed in 1,000 American prisoners. Between 8 and 12 men died every single day on the Jersey alone. Thomas Dring survived the Jersey and wrote about the conditions. Prisoners slept in the dark lower decks without fresh air. Smallpox, yellow fever, and dysentery spread through the packed prisoners. The British gave them spoiled food and dirty water. Dead bodies piled up on deck each morning. Guards threw the corpses into shallow graves on the Brooklyn shore. Today, bones from these prisoners still wash up on Brooklyn beaches. In total, 11,500 Americans died on British prison ships during the Revolutionary War. Andersonville Prison Camp Starvation. Andersonville became the deadliest prison in American Civil War history. The Confederates built it in Georgia in February 1864 to hold 10,000 Union prisoners. By August 1864, they had crammed 33,000 men into the same space. The prison was just 26 acres surrounded by wooden walls. Prisoners lived outdoors with no shelter from Georgia's blazing sun or winter cold. Each prisoner received 1/4 pound of cornmeal and 1/8 pound of rotten meat per day. This starvation diet caused mass scurvy, a disease from lack of vitamin C. Prisoners' teeth fell out, old wounds reopened, and they slowly bled to death internally. In August 1864, 100 men died every day. A prisoner named Dorrance Atwater secretly kept a list of the dead. He recorded 12,461 names by the war's end. In total, 12,913 Union soldiers died at Andersonville in just 14 months. The prison commander, Henry Wirtz, became the only Civil War figure executed for war crimes. Isolation deaths. Château d'If sits on a small island near Marseille, France. From 1540 to 1890, France used it as a prison for political enemies. The worst cells were underground dungeons carved from solid rock. These cells measured 6 feet by 6 feet with no windows or light. Prisoners spent years in total darkness. The only sound was waves crashing against the rocks. During France's religious wars from 1545 to 1750, the prison held Protestant prisoners. Records show 3,500 of them died in the dungeons. The isolation drove prisoners insane before they died. Jean-Baptiste Chateau went completely mad in his cell in 1820. He spent his last days screaming at invisible demons. During storms, seawater flooded the lower cells. Chained prisoners drowned in their cells, unable to escape the rising water. The horrors of Château d'If inspired Alexandre Dumas to write The Count of Monte Cristo, which helped spark prison reform movements across Europe. Fire deaths. April 21, 1930, became the deadliest day in American prison history. A fire started in scaffolding at Ohio Penitentiary in Columbus at 4:30 p.m. The flames spread through 6 cell blocks in just 30 minutes. The prison held 4,300 inmates in a building designed for 1,500. The overcrowding turned the fire into a death trap. Guards refused to open the cells even as smoke filled the building. They feared a mass escape more than mass death. 800 men remained locked in their burning cells, screaming for help. 2 prisoners, William O'Neill and Andy Thomas, grabbed keys from a dead guard. They opened cells and saved 21 lives before the smoke killed them too. The fire killed 322 prisoners in total. Some burned to death, Others died from smoke inhalation. The disaster led to new federal prison construction standards and mandatory fire evacuation procedures that saved countless lives. Starvation Pit. Rome's Mamertine prison was built in 640 BCE, making it one of the world's oldest prisons. It consisted of 2 underground chambers carved from solid stone. The lower chamber, called the Tullianum, became Rome's execution chamber. This pit measured only 6.5 feet high. Prisoners were lowered through a hole in the ceiling. Once down, there was no way back up. Rome used this pit to kill enemies through starvation and neglect. In 104 BCE, they threw Jugurtha, the king of Numidia, into the pit. He survived 6 days without food or water before dying. The Romans left his body to rot as a warning. Christian tradition says St. Peter was held there before his crucifixion in 64 CE, though historians debate this. For over 1,000 years, until 400 CE, countless prisoners died in this dark pit. The prison still exists today as a tourist attraction, showing visitors how Rome killed through deliberate neglect. Typhus Epidemic. In 1750, Newgate Prison in London created one of history's deadliest courtroom disasters. The prison held 300 inmates in space meant for 50. These conditions bred typhus, a disease spread by lice. When prisoners came to court for trial, they brought the disease with them. The event became known as the Black Assize. During one trial session at London's Old Bailey Courthouse, infected prisoners spread typhus to everyone present. Within 2 weeks, 40 court officials died. The dead included the Lord Mayor of London, 2 judges, the undersheriff, and 36 jurors. They died from high fever, severe headaches, and organ failure. Prison reformer John Howard visited Newgate in 1777 and documented the horror. He found that 25% of all prisoners died from disease every year. The Black Assize led Britain to create its first prison health regulations and require ventilation in all prisons. Scurvy Deaths. The North had its own version of Andersonville at Elmira Prison in New York. From July 1864 to July 1865, Elmira held Confederate prisoners in conditions designed to kill. The prison sat in a swampy area that froze in winter. Prisoners lived in thin tents on frozen mud. They received only 1,600 calories of food per day, 800 calories below what a person needs to survive in freezing conditions. The lack of fresh vegetables caused a scurvy epidemic. By January 1865, 1,870 prisoners had scurvy. Their gums turned black, their teeth fell out, and old wounds reopened. Prison surgeon Eugene Sanger wrote about amputating frostbitten fingers and toes without anesthesia. The prison had no medicine for the sick. Of the 12,123 Confederate prisoners held at Elmira, 2,963 died. This 24% death rate was the highest of any northern prison. The survivors called Elmira Hell-Mira for the rest of their lives. Torture deaths. The French built Hoa Lo Prison in Hanoi, Vietnam in 1896 to break the spirit of Vietnamese rebels. The name means fiery furnace in Vietnamese. The prison earned its name from the unbearable heat inside. Prisoners were shackled to concrete slabs in cells that reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They received 1 bowl of rice per day and a cup of dirty water. The French installed a guillotine in the prison courtyard. Between 1902 and 1922, they used it to execute 488 Vietnamese prisoners. The French killed an estimated 2,000 Vietnamese at Hoa Lo between 1896 and 1954. Later, North Vietnam used the same prison for American pilots during the Vietnam War. The Americans called it the Hanoi Hilton as a dark joke. 17 American POWs died there between 1964 and 1973. Today, the prison is a museum showing instruments of torture and execution used over its 100-year history. Carandiru Massacre. On October 2, 1992, a small fight between prisoners turned into Brazil's worst prison massacre. Carandiru Prison in São Paulo held 8,000 inmates in a building made for 3,500. When a fight broke out in Pavilion 9, prison officials called in military police. What happened next shocked the world. Police entered the prison and started shooting into locked cells. They fired 515 bullets in 3 hours. The police killed 111 prisoners that day. Forensic evidence showed something terrible. 84 prisoners were shot in the back or while lying down. These men were trying to surrender or hide when police executed them. No police officers died, only 9 officers faced trial, and none went to prison. The Inter-American Court ruled against Brazil for human rights violations. Brazil demolished Carandiru in 2002, but survivors still demand justice for the massacre. Psychological torture. Romania's communist government created history's most extreme psychological torture program at Pitești prison. From 1949 to 1951, they tried to break political prisoners through re-education. The program's leader was a prisoner named Eugen Turcanu. Guards gave him power to torture other inmates. The program forced prisoners to torture their friends to prove loyalty to communism. Ion Gavrila Ogoranu survived and documented what happened. Prisoners were forced to eat feces and drink urine. They had to mock religious ceremonies and curse God. Friends were forced to beat each other unconscious daily. The torture was so extreme that 22 prisoners died from injuries. Another 38 committed suicide after release, unable to live with what they had done or what was done to them. The program ended in 1951 when details leaked to the West. Even other communist countries condemned Romania for these methods. Desert deaths. Syria's Tadmor prison in the desert near Palmyra killed an estimated 17,000 prisoners between 1980 and 2001. The prison's most infamous day was June 27, 1980. After an assassination attempt on President Assad, soldiers entered Tadmor with machine guns. They killed between 500 and 1,000 prisoners in their cells as revenge. The exact number remains unknown because Syria destroyed the records. Daily life in Tadmor meant slow death from heat and starvation. Summer temperatures reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Prisoners received 200 grams of bread and thin soup each day. Guards beat prisoners every morning as they counted them. Amnesty International called Tadmor a kingdom of death and madness in their 2001 report. When ISIS captured Palmyra in 2015, they destroyed the empty prison with explosives. This destruction erased evidence of 3 decades of deaths, ensuring the full truth may never be known. Modern supermax prisons claim humane conditions, yet 815 U.S. prisoners died from suicide in 2019 alone, suggesting isolation itself remains a form of slow death.